Witness, a showcase where we invite guest photographers from all around the world to show interesting works in a way to inspire either creativity or compassion that truly connects us all. My name is Parimal. I'm your producer and host. And with that, let me welcome my good friend and partner and artist in residence, Art Wolfe. Art, how are you?
I am excellent. Thank you for asking.
Great. It's almost Friday, Art. Although it's Tuesday, let's be optimistic. It's almost Friday. I'm waiting. I love the weekends.
That's very optimistic.
It's extremely optimistic. The reason I say is, I heard somewhere it's better to be an optimist than to be a pessimist. And today we have a really special guest photographer from Australia who is a ex-psychotherapist. That was his past life. That was 15 years back. Since then, he is a professional photographer, an award-winning photographer. And his name is Robert van Koesveld. Welcome, Robert. It's great to have you join Earth as a Witness.
Thanks very much for having me. It's good to be here.
Great. Now, the reason I mentioned Robert's background, psychotherapist, is because today's topic is a work in progress that Robert is working on. It's called Still Winter. It's beautiful landscapes, black and white landscapes, but it's more than landscapes. It's shot in a region in Japan, Hokkaido. And the reason why it's interesting, and I mentioned Robert's background, is Robert is going to show the work and inspire us to think beyond, if you will, minimalistic, to see the contemplative nature of his work. And this is where I'm sure as he starts talking, you will make the connection, as I have, in getting to know Robert, the connection between his work and his background. And guess what? Given COVID times, we're all lonely. We can all use a bit of, positive thinking and contemplative nature. So with that, Robert, really excited. Anything you want to say about the project Still Winter before we get started?
Well, sure. I mean, this is from, normally I work on a few bodies of work at the same time. So this one has been a long-term project in the north of Japan, where they have a nice deep winter. Lots of, the snow is deep enough to sink down into. And I'm interested in the stillness and also the kind of winterness. From Australia, we don't have a lot of snow, so snow's cool for us, in
there
both
you go.
ways.
Okay, so let's go ahead and share, Robert, and we can get started.
All right.
By the way, I got to say, while you're sharing, in the spirit of winter landscapes, I got myself a nice single malt scotch. I just felt it is apt for me to be in the receptive, contemplative nature. I need a bit of help.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. So, the still part in this body of work is about the quietness and stillness that you can experience in these kind of landscapes, because they're reduced and simplified by this blanket of snow. You see the kind of underlying structure of the place, and it kind of slows you down, calms you down, and you have a sense of something bigger than you. And then lately in this body of work, the winter part is more about the kind of COVID-related stuff, about struggle and survival and waiting. And Hokkaido is a place where people are used to long, hard winters and they know how to deal with it. So let's keep moving. I'll show you the first one. Here we go.
It's beautiful.
This is a farming area in the summer, and so there are windbreaks but fields often in the foreground, potato fields sometimes in this particular area. But once the blanket of snow is there, you get these very reduced spaces. And in composition, I'm thinking about the whole frame. How do I use everything that's in the image to communicate something? People often talk about this work as minimal, or they talk about empty space, but there's a Japanese concept. People in Japan always say, difficult, I can't translate it. But it means something about the mystery of space and the meaning of space. It's,
Is that the word ma you mentioned, Robert?
yeah, ma. Yeah. It just means space, but it has a particular usage that has this more sacred, special space, space as communicating something. When I'm making images, I try to really slow down. You know how you can get acquisitive when you're making images and lost in the technical stuff. But if I'm shooting on my own or shooting with my friend, I just take time. So something like this, which is, graphically strong, just moving the camera an inch this way, an inch that way makes a difference. So there's a lot of kind of consideration, and I'll find myself lying in the snow, sometimes while it's snowing. And while you're doing it, you're very focused. And then as soon as you stop, you realize you're freezing to death, This series is in monochrome, and this image is good in color, but it's more poetic, I think, in monochrome.
So can I interject? I think
Yes.
the word poetic, you just used the word poetic. And when I look at this image, Robert and Parimal, I think of music. I look at the foreground elements of the grass and just the liveliness of that as contrasted to the very formality of those coniferous trees in winter in the back. And
Yes.
so I look at musical notes in the foreground and almost like a piano key in the back. The other thing that strikes me is it's a very vertical and horizontal image. The horizon's horizontal. The lines through the base of the trunks of the trees are very graphically horizontal, and yet there's a lot of verticality. So it's the play of that with the space and the arrangement. As you say, it's very graphic, but it's also poetic in the way I respond to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's one of the things we can forget about images. And when we talk about composition and stuff like that, really, images can speak to our heart. Images we can associate. So if you slow down enough, the image starts to have a little conversation. So your association to music and all of that, that's the sort of way we actually read images. They're not all about leading lines and all that stuff. They're often about what do they mean for us.
Can I just say my feeling of this image, in some ways, now that I look at this particular frame, the Zoom frame, that's a conversation that Art, you, Robert, and I are having along with our audience. I feel those two components of that image are also having a conversation. The trees at the back with the grass in the front is almost like a conversation. I love that.
Yeah,
as you go on.
You look at the grass in the foreground, and it's very random. There's no formality to it. It's almost like they're free to be young and free. And then there's the adults in the room, which is the trees that are much more formal.
I love it.
Yes. It's like the parents who have to work for a living and the teenager kid who doesn't want to do any homework, won't listen to anything.
You guys are free associating beautifully.
Yeah, and that's the single malt scotch right there.
Yes.
Medicinal. This is when I photograph in Hokkaido. I've been working with my friend Daisuke Kondo, who is someone I lead photo tours with now. And we love the beginning and end of the day. You can feel that crispness of the snow. I think we're in the morning now, when the snow has been kind of frozen overnight, and you get these lovely long shadows. And in monochrome, the blue skies can kind of be any tone you want. You select out the blues, and here they're darker. So that means we have a nice tonal range. About half my work's in mono and half is not. This is a grove that's kind of famous. I've never been here without some other photographers being here. It's been photographed a long time, but what's delicious is each time it's different. Each time you come, the weather is different, something is different, where you stand is different. Here, of course, it was snowing. And, I'm always, it feels like magic when it snows. I'm from Australia. It never snows in Perth. We have small areas where you get snow, but mostly So snow is kind of like magic. And in terms of what we've been talking about it here is a kind of tribe of trees, a family of trees, and they're caught in a world of things swirling around them. And I think they're kind of calm in that space. I think with photography, what matters is intent. If I see these trees and I think I want to photograph those trees, I'll end up with a photograph of a bunch of trees, which can be nice. But if I think I'm wanting to photograph something of the sort of sweetness, of the mystery of what we're calling poetry, something about what my unconscious mind is making of that, then I'll think differently about the image. So, here I've decided to focus on the snow itself. So that means shifting the focus point and all that stuff, and playing with shutter speeds. And it's a different image. I'll move on.
It's beautiful.
Well, before you move on, I shot a similar image recently in Yellowstone, where it was a out of focus buffalo, but the thing that was in focus were the snowflakes, just like in this image of these trees. So when I saw it, it's almost, it would have been fun to play that image from one to the other, because they're almost identical in concept and in shape. The buffalo is a little more obvious, but it's still that same concept of,
yes, I can picture the buffalo. Yes.
Yeah.
And, we can read those shapes, we don't need all the detail. We know this is a bunch of trees, it's a grove. It's called the grove, and it's like a bunch of elders or a family. And I guess we're storytellers, aren't we? We're photography is about more than, it's always an interpretation.
I'm a little scared to interpret this image because I know you have been an ex-psychotherapist in your past, and I worry that you will start judging me for all kinds of issues I got.
You're safe in this space.
Yeah, no, I'm amassing quite a notebook of all your sayings, and I would encourage you to drink more scotch because I'm filling up the first notebook already.
Thank you very much. And I have a new friend that Robert can treat me with whatever I got. Thank you, Robert.
That's it. Yeah, people always get like this when they know you're a psychotherapist, or in my case, an ex-psychotherapist. You should relax,
Thank you very much.
This is in a place called the Blue Lagoon, or Blue Lake, which is very famous around BA there. And it's normally a bright blue. So it's a very, very treacherous, slippery, icy path there. And I get there, and of course there's no blue because the lake's frozen and the snow is on it. And then how it is with photography, you have to kind of be in the world, moving around and ready. And then the photo gods give you something. So here was this magical track cutting across the shadows. And that wasn't the picture I was hoping for, but I think it's a good image.
Why do you say it's not the picture you were hoping for?
Well, because the place that's famous is bright blue. The water is full of copper and bright blue, but we can't see the water because it's frozen. In the foreground there would normally be bright blue water, but so that was what I was hoping for, because you do your research, you see that, but instead I got this lovely image. That people think of photography as about a moment, but often it's about other moments. Like we're looking at the record of a moment of a rabbit crossing this path, and then all those other tracks we've seen in our life and our own journey. So there's all those moments layered on each other, I think.
Right.
It's also a kind of code, that there's a kind of language that you can sometimes see in the world. That we're kind of archaeologists discovering an ancient language. So this is a language we can't read in words, but we can read. This is another coded text image. The funny thing, I think of it as a novel written in the snow. And one of the things that's funny about it is if I put it in a Facebook advertisement, the algorithms say, no, you can't use text. And then I say to the algorithms, what does it say? What does it say? And the algorithms go quiet. And eventually weeks go by and a human person comes along and says, no, actually it's an image. But, even the algorithms read this as text, and this kind of lovely language of a crop.
Yeah. Did we lose Art for some internet connection?
Pardon?
Did we, I think, lose Art for some internet connection? Sounds like.
Okay, well, we just...
But let's keep going. He will join. I just texted him to see what happened, or his team.
Okay. It's another graphic image. The built landscape also has a special quality. This is a greenhouse that's been pulled down for the duration of the winter. One of the things I find is when you work on a body of work, rather than single images, and in a way, this is the space that COVID has given me more, is I can take, a few thousand images from Hokkaido, start to find, well, what really interests me? What would be an exhibition? What would be a book from this place? And, you go beyond the single images. You're looking at one image, talking to another image. It's often good to look at your images and think, do I still like them? Or were they an image that I made because I saw this technique in a magazine or someone else did it? I thought, gee whiz, I better do that. But actually it's boring, or it's no longer interesting. It's too technical. Or what is it? This image still, I look at it and I feel my heart warmed, or something grabs me. It becomes your own image.
How much, Robert, if I can ask you, from when you approach a landscape like this, and I should clarify, this is such a strikingly simple image, right? But at the same time, so engaging. I don't know why, but it is so engaging because maybe it's so simple, right? That's the paradox. It says so less, and it's trying to at the same time say so much.
Yeah.
When you compose an image like this, how much time does it take for you to get in the zone of seeing this image before you actually click the shutter?
Well, I think there's a sort of cycle in photography where there's the kind of before, so there's a long time before where you're training your visual mind. You're getting in the right kind of openness to kind of images, which you have to watch that you don't end up with too narrow a shot list, or, like you're out for one thing and you're missing everything else. And then you kind of have to be in the zone. So that's a kind of mind state. How do you get in the zone, as you start out in the morning? There are tricks that you do, like to start taking photographs straight away as soon as you walk out the door, to not judge, to keep moving, to trust yourself whenever you see something. And then for both those reasons, you might see something like this. And you don't know why it's appealing, like now I look at it even right now, and it's a kind of a house, I know it's a greenhouse. It does look like this weird thing, but that's part of what makes it work. It is this graphic structure, but it's a human structure in this very simple landscape, and there's enough tones there. And then as you're taking it, you play with calm and tension. It's not at the rule of thirds, is it? Like you pull the camera around and think what works, and that's where this word comes in. What creates the right balance tension.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. One more image from, this is in the flatlands, and in summer it's all crops. Some areas it's flowers, some areas it's potatoes, some areas it's grain crops. But in the winter, the snow takes over. And so it does have that graphic quality. It does have stillness, but it's starting to also talk about just how tough winter is. This structure is trying to stop the snow closing the road. You're going to be stuck at home unless they build these things. And, in this area, the snowplows are out every morning, clearing, the people are clearing their paths every morning, every day. They're just onto it. Because if you stop for a second, if you don't fight it, you won't move, But
the shadows in this image are stunning. It almost has a larger than life perspective.
Yeah, it's nice. And, again, it's kind of like, oh, well, that's good. Let's take that picture. You're driving around looking for natural landscapes, and then here are these beautiful shadows. So, so now we're on the other coast, and these are whooper swans on Lake Kushihara. And this is really interesting. The longest lens I carry normally is a 135mm lens. So I'm not a landscape photographer. I'm not getting close-ups. I just can't. I want to travel. I normally just have 3 or 4 lenses, and they're not zooms. But animals in the landscape are just wonderful, where animals are a part of the landscape. That's something I really love. I'm sure Art's, if he's back, he's been to Antarctica, and that's a world that sometimes it just belongs to the creatures. There's no fences. And this is something of that quality. And, down the road is where most people are. There's a big car park and an area on the shore, and the big buses pull up, and the people with their big lenses get out, and they're making certain shots. But when you're traveling light and there's just me and Di, or me and a small group, we can find other spots. And so, my friend Daisuke and I are here. There's just the sound of these swans, chatting amongst each other. We're whispering and just focused on the special privilege of being here with these. They're timeless, aren't they? This is another world.
They're timeless and Zen-like, very calm, very meditative. I can almost feel the silence that you described. You can in the stillness of the winter.
Yeah, you get drawn into the stillness if you let yourself. It's nice if you know how to use your camera and you're not mucking around with settings. Then you're just finding images and letting the situation talk to you.
What does it do to your mind, Robert, as a photographer, when you are in these very still winter landscapes compared to, let's say, a super busy street, in India, bustling, and it's a different kind of vibrancy? How does...
Yeah, that's a good question, because, like India is like, it's a whole world. It's really one of my favorite places, right up there. It's a whole universe. And, you still have to be in a flow state. You learn to sort of surf the crowds and there's the kind of stillness in the face of all that busyness. When people first come to India, they see the intensity, but then you get used to it and you just, there's a kind of calmness. But here, well, it's magical. I think about in traditional Chinese paintings, they talk about the space between heaven and earth. The middle zone, and in a way, you're sometimes in that zone. You're in between the clouds and the earth. You're in the between space, and I think that's what you're in. So here, the soft focus is not me. It's the snow. It's snowing.
Yeah.
And again, in this situation, there's lots of photographers with the big lenses, but I'm interested in this. Community, they make you catch your breath, these birds. They're so, it's like a whole culture, they have a dance and an art form where we're witnessing another planet, another universe.
Art is missing out on this. I just heard from Art that it's thunderstorms there and the lights flickering in his house and the internet is down. So he's going to try to join by phone.
Okay.
He would have loved to see this, I'm sure.
All right. Well,
let's keep going.
These things happen, don't they? We're talking about the weather and all of that. And
yeah.
That's how it is. The weather affects us. We're not in control. COVID's taught us that too. We're never in control,
Control, I'm sure you know this, control is an illusion.
It really is, but we cling to it. And in the West, that illusion of control is very compelling because, we mostly feel like we're in control. And it's only when we have children that we realize we're not, and and life and death,
Speaking
and
of control,
go on.
Speaking of control, Robert, how do you as a photographer, let's say you have an image or a composition in mind, but circumstances won't let you have that. Things are not what you thought they would be, weather-wise, composition-wise. How do you make peace with not having what you wanted and then being receptive to what you didn't have in mind, but being able to receive it?
Well, it's a long lesson, isn't it? It's like I'm probably more known for people photography. And when I see someone, a real interesting person, and I want their picture and they wave their hand at me and say no, I say in my head, 7 billion people. There's another person around the corner. It would have been nice. I let it go. It's fine, and you just do something else. But I make it sound easier than it is, but you do just have to let it go. COVID's been good for me like that. I can't travel. I normally travel 3 months of the year, and I'm inverted commas stuck home, but I get to sit in the studio and print work and look at it and just take time reflecting on how a body of work clings together, or how to get 1 or 2% more effectiveness in the way I've managed an image.
Art, you're back. Good to have you back. Sounds like internet went down at your place.
It totally went down. I had to have Kyle return home.
Okay. No worries. I'm glad you're back. In fact, Art, let me ask you that question. And it's a question that I just asked Robert, of control being an illusion. Internet went down. We had a plan, and and things happen. And the question was this, and I had a great answer from Robert. Let me ask you as a photographer as well. How do you deal with a situation where, let's say you had a composition in mind, right? But go to a location and circumstances are not what you thought they would be, and you're not going to get the shot you wanted. But then how do you deal with that, make peace with it, and then being open to receiving what the composition has to offer instead, which is not what you wanted. It's something different.
I think that's the definition of my last 40 years is adapting quickly to new offerings. Because I'm pretty controlled. And I've been to Hokkaido a lot of times and teach a lot of workshops. If I go to Hokkaido and it's not quite what I expected, certainly when opportunities close down, new ones arise. And you just have to be open. And I think everything comes to bear. All your experiences, all your knowledge, all your instincts come to bear. And suddenly you see things that you wouldn't have maybe otherwise have seen if you were really focused on that preconceived idea. So I look at opportunities all the time, and I never come home empty-handed, simply because I'm receptive and open-minded enough to recognize not everything's going to be the way you believe it to be.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess there's two sides. There's the Zen side of just going, stuff happens, let's look what else is there. But having a good kind of visual knowledge, having a lot of potential shots, having a generic shot list in your head, just knowing about possibilities, then, there are always things I can do, even if they're not what I wanted to do. They're not even fantastic, but okay, let's try this shot. Even though I've done it before, maybe this one will be better. So that's more a kind of list of possibilities. Yeah. Here, we're at the top of a mountain in a ski resort. We go up the ski lift in a blizzard. I mean, they call it a ropeway, but it's really a ski lift in my language. And of course, it was a whiteout. And we sit in the little cafeteria there. The Japanese have these wonderful machines everywhere. So we're holding hot coffee tins in our hands to unfreeze our hands, having come up in the snow. And then for 10 minutes, this opens up, and this magical, very kind of vast space in this little person, enjoying himself or getting ready to enjoy himself. And you can see the wind on the top of the hills.
The scale, it really puts that in perspective. The scale of the mountain.
And like this one, this is actually a mini mountain range, but in this reduced world, and by excluding some things out of frame, this is like a garden, but it's got something of the same gravitas, something of the same seriousness. That little thing that looks like a boat, I don't know what it is, but it's smaller than a boat. But you can play with scale in this monochrome world.
Yeah.
When I'm looking in the viewfinder these days, I'm looking kind of to expose a negative, and I'm imagining how the scene will look in Lightroom or even a print. So that's happened in the last few years, that instead of, I'm looking at the image that I might make, and that doesn't mean I'll make that image, but I think in terms of negative and then the realization of the image, and the realization in terms of a book or a print or something like that.
How do you know, Robert, and maybe a question to both of you, how do you know when it's time to click the shutter, that it's an image worth taking?
Well, I don't always know. I'm resigned to taking a lot of pictures that I'll never use. I think of it as taking notes. Sometimes you're composing and thinking, how does this look? You don't really know how it looks through a camera exactly, unless you look through a camera some of the time. Then the other thing is I have a feeling in my chest, in my heart. Sometimes it's just, and like the more powerful the image, the more special the image, the more I'll have sometimes almost a sick feeling. This is, I'm deeply moved. And then I have to kind of get it together. Then I have to realize that image, get the negative, and I don't always pull it off. But so it's a kind of, you want the camera to be an extension of yourself, and you want your emotion. For me, my emotion is the shutter release. But that's not to say that there's only one exposure. Got it.
Art, any thoughts on that?
It really depends on the subject. If it's wildlife or culture, you can't, you kind of forget about it. I forgot the question.
The question was, when do you know it's time to take an image, as you're seeing different.
To me, when it's an abstract or it's a landscape, or as in this beautiful shot of the fractured ice refrozen, it's not like there's like the perfect timing. It's the eye seeing the subject. And once you've honed in, it's not about timing at all. With culture and wildlife, it is really about timing, and a split second before or after could change the entire makeup and emotional component of the image. But in a landscape like this, all the work's really been done to get and see it. Then the timing is less relevant than the moment or of finding and composing and seeing it.
Got it. Makes sense.
In something like this, because I think these kind of vast textured images say something about space and this kind of winter environment. So you first of all have to kind of have that idea that this is interesting. I've been here and I pointed it out to people, but they're not so interested in it, but I am. So then you have to think quite kind of technically, how do I line it up? What do I need to leave out that's going to annoy me later? How do I get enough depth? That's a kind of tweaking, moving one step this way, one step that way, just playing with it, learning. There's this thing called perimeter patrol, where your eyes go around the frame, around the edge of the frame. What is going to annoy me later? What is missing? What do I need to leave out? So that's a kind of thinking process.
Right. Beautiful image.
lots of people really love this image when it's printed. And yet when you're in Hokkaido, this is there's a lot of scenes like this at the side of the road as you're driving along. And I always want to stop. And it took me quite a few attempts to get clear the kind of images that I want. And what I've found is that artists are more likely to be drawn to this. You know, they understand about texture and a lot of marks building up an image out of lots of little pieces. So, you know, this is an image that prints well. And when you're printing images like that, I test lots of paper. These days I'm testing ink flow, varying the ink flow, doing all sorts of stuff because you want the tones to work. You want like the blacks and the not quite blacks and all of those gradations to work. So it's the Ansel Adams stuff, but you have to translate that into the print. And because you've got all that white space, you want that white space to be a pleasure and to reach out to you. Paper is really important in prints, the texture and the qualities. And this is the last image. I thought of it in our current context as a socially distanced set of trees. One of the first images I made in Hokkaido. I like that kind of sculpture, you know. If you know the work Blue Poles, obviously it's not referencing that, but you know, their artwork is part of our visual language, traditional art and modern art. It's referencing that. I think it's an image that demands to be printed. Again, it's an image in color that's quite nice, but you know, I printed this again yesterday on a new paper and it just sings. It just sings as a print. So what do we do now? This is the last of my
image. No, thank you for sharing. It's a lovely image. I do have a few questions.
Okay.
But before there, I think your website is people want to check out more. And you also do photo tours, right, Robert? That, you know, post-COVID, that if people want to find out, what's the best way for people to find out about your work and your photo tours?
I think if they go to the website, or they can find me through Instagram, and then there'll be a link to the website. All roads lead to the website, and then you'll go to Daisuke's website, Spark Photography in Japan. He's who I work with in Japan. I also run Ladakh workshops. So they'll hopefully, you know, later next year, and certainly the next Hokkaido one is the year after in January, February 22. We run small groups, a maximum of 6 people. There's 2 leaders. Dai's a very accomplished photographer and lives in Hokkaido. And so we have time. This is the first time we've done a just Hokkaido trip. And we'll probably alternate one winter just Hokkaido, the next winter a little bit more, you know, the monkeys and stuff like that. But this is time to just, you know, we could go back to some places, keep seeing what images, seeing what it's like in a different light on a different day, traveling right across the island. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's lovely. Thanks for sharing. You can close the presentation if you want. I do have a few questions. A question, Robert, is what is your background as a psychotherapist? You know, although you're a professional photographer for the last 15 years now, how has that influenced the way you see things?
I used people, when I first stopped being a photographer, my friends who stopped being a psychotherapist, my friends would say, oh, you photograph like a psychotherapist. And I'd roll my eyes and think, yeah. But, and I first saw it in my people photography, which I'm perhaps more known for. But, you know, the truth is you get very good at reading expression, at reading body language. We're all born reading body language, or nearly all of us, you know, we look at mum's face and reading it, but we forget to do that over time. But, you know, a psychotherapist needs to do that. But I think the experience of, in some kinds of psychotherapy, there's a kind of reverie, there's a kind of the patient, the client is invited to reflect, to see what's happening inside of themselves, and you're kind of trying to tune into that. So I think doing that time and time and time again on a good day, you fall into that space, you fall into a reflective space. And slowly I'm realizing that when people talk about what is this photograph about rather than what it's of, because I think along the journey to being a photographer, you start off taking photographs of things, of people, and then eventually you move to taking something that has another meaning. But the meaning as a visual person, it's not always a sentence. It's not always words. It's a kind of knowing, a kind of sensation. So, there's a kind of elegance, or there's a kind of stillness, or there's something that we might call poetry. And you have to hold that, you can't grasp it because it's ephemeral, but you hold it lightly. And try to realize that. And maybe it works, maybe it turns into a different image later, but giving space to that,
I have one more final question for both of you as we end this, but before I do that, Art, any questions questions for Robert, and vice versa? Robert, anything for Art?
At the end of the day, when you've photographed, Robert, what kind of feeling do you have? I mean, when you've gotten a great shot that day, or something that really what kind of a feeling?
You're going to hate this answer. I nearly always feel I've failed, like when I finish some work, I think, it's hopeless. I might as well give up. Why did I waste money on photographic gear? And then slowly I think, oh, this is not so bad, or this image is nice. And I think that's the artist's journey. There's a lot of doubt in the artist's journey.
So it sounds like you need a psychotherapist to travel with.
I'm my own psychotherapist, but my wife says, we've been through this before, calm down. You've got something to offer, But, that's a part of the artist's journey. You have high standards, and you want to make powerful, meaningful images. And that doesn't come easily, Other people are happy, but I know I can do better. Are you different, Art?
Okay, but so you go back to the room or wherever, and you think, okay, well, it didn't meet my expectations, but then at a certain point in the future, you recognize that you got a shot that you really, truly.
Yeah. Then I'm really excited. Then I get that feeling back. And I think, well, you pull that off, And
sometimes, how long does it take you before you realize that image?
I can take months.
Wow.
Okay. Months. I've got a high standard, I put things out on the internet, and they're unfinished. And then I'll often come back through my images, and I find things that I just, why did I ignore them? They're great, and I find something new. I like that. You dredge through the images from 6 months ago. That's what I'm doing in COVID time. And you find something delicious, and you just.
So it sounds like to me you've got to separate a little bit of the emotions and the expectations. And then with a little bit of time and separation, you can evaluate or look at the image a little more objectively.
Yeah. And I mean, for the image to work, it has to work for you, but it also has to work for someone else. So you have to kind of realize the image, realize the print, take the negative and the original exposure, and turn it into something that someone else is going to respond to, and I want people to stay with an image and sit with an image. I made a body of work where I had a box of images with a tea master friend, and that's my alarm going off. Stop. I don't know.
Is it time to get up, Robert?
No, it's time to get up. So we made just a small set of images, and people would sit in a room just looking at these images, and that taught me a lot about putting enough kind of reflection into an image so that it invites reflection. You know, on the internet, on Instagram, you get an instant like, but you know, if something's going to hang on the wall, it has to be able to hold that person for years.
Can I just make an observation? I think, Robert, we knew that you are a ex-psychotherapist turned photographer. I think, Art, with your question, you have turned photographer into a psychotherapist.
Well, let me put it this way. If I've led workshops for 40 years, you better damn well be a psychotherapist, because you get thrown into all sorts of different situations with a lot of different characters. So you have to read, as Robert said earlier, you have to read people, and you have to, you know, and hopefully at the end of the tour or the day, people are happy and enthusiastic. So a lot of that's how you handle or work with people. So
yeah, I agree. That's a part of it. Japan is also totally about being a host. You know, they really value the host-guest relationship. It's an equal relationship, and so mostly when I'm leading a tour, I'm trying to be a good host. You know. And
I loved your answer, Robert. You know, Art, not that you asked that question to me. You know, I'm not a professional, but if you had asked the question to me, my answer would be exact reverse of Robert. Is I feel I've nailed it, and 3 months later, I feel it actually sucks. Robert is the other way around, and I'd rather be Robert. That's why I'm not a professional. That's why I'm me. But in a banter aside, I love the honesty with which, you know, Robert, you shared your answer to Art's question, and you know, it was probably a bit of a vulnerable moment for you, you know, to share how you feel, and thank you for that.
Okay, my pleasure.
I have one last question to both of you. As we end this, you know, delightfully, I'd say stimulating, you know, conversation. Given COVID times, and generally we don't go into COVID, we know it is what it is, you know, let's get on with life. But given your background and the body of work, Robert, you shared today, and a question is to both of you, starting with Art first. What is the role you feel of creativity or photography in keeping the human spirit alive in the midst of adversity?
Well, you know, I have dove deep into my files, and I've worked on various projects, and every time, and including approximately 8 hours today, every time I look at an image, I reflect back on the moment I took it. And I've been traveling all through the earth today, just this day. And all those memories come back, and it keeps me operating on a very high level of enthusiasm and happiness. And fortunately, I have those files and those memories, and I'm very, very productive, as I think a lot of successful people are during the last 8 months. They're looking at newfound time. That's not to discount all the misery and death that has surrounded this awful virus. But for me, I've looked at it as an opportunity to do the work that I've not been able to do over the last, say, 10 years. And so every day I get up enthusiastically, and I know that next year will bring new travels. And so and even in tequila time, I try to infuse my audience with a positive energy. And I know a lot of people tune into that simply because they want something upbeat and positive, and they love looking at images. So that's kind of how I personally treat that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I share some of that. I feel privileged to, you know, be safe and have a lovely house and be able to work through my images. I've done some little projects. You know, I have an ongoing bunch of images that I kind of do for myself called Home, which are just images from my garden, my home. A few weeks ago, I started a little series of shooting through the windows out, just, you know, they're little still lifes, little things, but it's fun, you know, but, and mostly, you know, at a certain point, discipline's important, and just making sure I work every day and keep working on images. And, you know, when you realize an image, you know, if you think of the exposure as the negative and you think of then what you do afterwards, through to print or whatever as the realization of the image, then you're making these tweaks to make the image more effective. And that's teaching you how to make good images, So all of that work of what people call editing, I prefer something like realization, or development even, that's developing your capacity. So hopefully your images will be stronger at exposure time.
Great.
But I think, sometimes you won't feel like do it, but if you're a creative person, then you have to create. So it's not always enjoyable, just keep plugging away,
Great. On that note of plugging away, thank you very much, Robert. Art, thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to all our audiences, both live and, replays and on demand. And once again, Robert, it was wonderful to see you share your work of Still Winter. Very contemplative, beautiful, and we'll see you back. Thanks again.
Okay, fantastic. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you. Nice to meet you both.
All right. Thank you.